My sister called my girlfriend's family terrorists and banned them from her wedding because she didn't want her photos looking like a refugee camp. So, we decided to give her the multicultural celebration she deserved. I was trying on my groomsmen tux when my phone buzzed. It was my sister, Sarah. Your girlfriend Yasmin can't come to the wedding. I don't want my wedding looking like a refugee camp in the photos. I froze. What? Look, the last thing I need is some loud Alibabas ruining my perfect aesthetic. She finished before hanging up. I was so angry that I didn't even see Yasmin standing behind me the entire time. Her voice was eerily calm. She wants aesthetic, then let's give her an aesthetic she'll never forget. She was already on the phone to her mom. Mama, Sarah just called us terrorists. I could hear her mom's voice exploding through the speaker in Arabic. The tailor shook his head. My daughter married Egyptian. Best thing that ever happened to our family. You want my advice? Give her the wedding she deserves. He winked at Yasmin. Come back tomorrow. I'll help with whatever you need. That night, Yasmin and I created a group chat. Her cousins, aunts, uncles, my cousin who hated Sarah all planning to show up to the wedding uninvited. My buddy Jake, another groomsman, texted immediately. Bro, I'm in. Sarah's been a bridezilla from hell. What's the plan? Yasmin's Aunt Fatima took charge, who has access to vendors. Jake came in clutch. I'm picking up the programs tomorrow. Give me whatever you want to add. My mom had the florist's number. I'll tell her we need some last-minute additions for the groom's family. Wasn't kidding about helping. The next day, he presented Yasmin with a dress. My gift, same designer who made Sarah's dress, same style. It was ivory with gold embroidery, basically a wedding dress, but technically not white. He said with a grin, even my mom was in on it. She called Mark's mom. I'm so excited. Yasmin's family is coming. Sarah must have kept it as a surprise. Mark's mom was confused but delighted. Oh, how wonderful. A multicultural celebration. 3 days before, Yasmin's dad made moves. He called the venue with his thickest accent. I am the family of the groom. We are only allowing traditional Egyptian food to be served. It's an important custom. The venue, terrified of discrimination lawsuits, agreed to everything. My mom's book club joined the cause. These Connecticut ladies were ready. We'll make sure those Egyptian women get seated prominently. Barbara promised. I'll personally make sure they get past security. The group chat hit 50 members. Random Egyptian relatives from 3 states away were driving in. We heard someone called us terrorists at a wedding. Everyone was bringing something. Food, decorations, attitudes. Then came the day of the wedding. Jake sent updates from inside. Sarah has no idea. She's focused on her hair. Perfect. When Yasmin's family arrived, it was close to 40 people. Word had spread through the entire Middle Eastern community. We heard there was a racism situation. One stranger said, "We're here to help." The parking lot looked like a luxury car show: Mercedes, BMWs, Teslas, all arriving in formation. Sarah was getting her makeup done 3 floors up, completely oblivious. A bellboy ran up. Are you the Egyptian wedding party? My manager wants to comp your rooms. He's Palestinian. Even the venue was choosing sides. I peeked into the ceremony space. Sarah stood at the altar looking pristine. Beige bridesmaids, beige flowers, beige everything. She had no idea 40 people in ivory and gold were circling like sharks. Yasmin's mom surveyed the scene like a general. The dessert trucks are in position. The DJ confirmed the playlist swap. Hannah's station is hidden behind the coat check. She turned to me. Your sister wanted an aesthetic. She's getting a whole new culture. The ceremony started. I stood at the altar watching Sarah beam. Behind her, through the windows, I could see the Egyptian convoy organizing. Had even shown up wearing his own hieroglyphic tie. The officiant droned on about love and commitment. Sarah had written vows about keeping their union pure and simple. I almost laughed. Nothing about the next 3 hours would be pure or simple. As they kissed, 40 Egyptians flooded that Connecticut country club. The security guard, confused by the sheer numbers and Barbara's book club ladies vouching for everyone, just gave up. Yasmin entered in her salé dress. The photographer screamed the cultural tribute. He abandoned the wedding party to photograph her family. The Egyptian dessert table didn't just appear, it took over. 5 tables of pastries that made the wedding cake look pathetic. Sarah's carefully planned reception turned into a full Egyptian party. Sarah's face went from confusion to horror as she took in the scene of her pristine beige reception transformed into a Cairo wedding hall. And for the first time since everything erupted, I walked over to her. She grabbed my arm, her manicured nails digging in. What the hell did you do? But before I could answer, Mark swept her away, gushing about how incredible it was that she'd arranged this multicultural surprise. She shoved him off and grabbed the mic. Her voice cracked through the speakers while her knuckles went white around the mic. The whole room went quiet except for phones lifting up everywhere to record. Mark reached for the mic, but she jerked away hard. Her voice got louder and higher as she pointed at Yasmin's family sitting at the front tables. The Egyptian aunties started talking in Arabic while the photographer kept snapping photos of everything happening. Mark's face changed from confused to shocked when he figured out this wasn't Sarah's surprise. Yasmin's mom stood up real slow from her table near the front. She walked toward the mic like she'd been waiting for this exact moment. Sarah held the mic tighter and backed up a few steps. Before anyone could do anything, Aunt Fatima made this loud sound that filled the whole country club. Other Egyptian women joined in, making the same sound until it drowned out Sarah completely. The DJ turned up the Arabic music like that was his signal. Mark finally got the mic away from Sarah and tried to fix things by asking everyone to just enjoy the party. His mom stood up and started clapping to the music, getting other confused guests to join in. Sarah stormed off toward the coat check area. I followed her and found her on her phone, calling the venue coordinator, demanding they kick out all the crashers right away. The coordinator showed up in less than 5 minutes, looking really uncomfortable. She explained that removing 40 paying guests who had been vouched for would cause a discrimination problem the venue couldn't afford. She mentioned the Palestinian manager already gave them free rooms, and any action could mean lawsuits. Sarah's face went from red to purple. Yasmin appeared next to me, calm like always, and handed Sarah a small envelope. Inside was a screenshot of Sarah's text calling Yasmin's family those terrible names. Yasmin told her quietly that all the vendors had copies too. Sarah understood the trap she was in now. She could make a scene and become the racist bride all over the internet, or she could deal with her reception being taken over. She crumpled the paper while tears ran through her makeup that was supposed to be waterproof. Mark showed up in the doorway with this unreadable look on his face. He asked Sarah straight out if the texts were true. When she didn't deny it and just started making excuses about wanting the right look and keeping things small, his shoulders dropped down. His mom appeared right behind him after following all the drama. She looked between Mark and Sarah while her face changed from confused to understanding to disappointed. Her hands gripped her purse tighter as she read the screen. Shot someone had passed to her. Mark's mom stepped closer to Sarah and shook her head slowly before turning to her son. "We need to talk about this later," she said quietly. Mark nodded and guided his mom out while Sarah stood there with mascara running down her cheeks. I headed back to the reception where the music had gotten even louder. The dance floor was packed with Yasmin's relatives doing traditional dances while the original wedding guests sat at their tables watching. Some of the braver ones had joined in and were trying to copy the moves. Jake caught my eye from across the room and gave me a huge thumbs up. Sarah came storming back into the reception about 10 minutes later. She made a beeline for the DJ booth, but one of Yasmin's uncles started dancing right in her path. Every time she tried to go around him, another relative would suddenly need to dance in that exact spot. The photographer had given up trying to get posed shots and was just capturing everything as it happened. The dessert table had completely taken over one whole side of the room, making the wedding cake look tiny. Sarah kept trying to get to the DJ, but the dancing relatives formed an accidental wall. The venue coordinator grabbed my arm and pulled me into the hallway. She had a clipboard with numbers that kept getting bigger as I watched. Extra security costs, overtime for the staff, special cleaning fees for the henna station. The total was already over $15,000. Who's covering this? She asked, tapping her pen on the clipboard. I found my mom talking with Yasmin's mom near the coat check, and they both looked pretty pleased with themselves. When I told them about the venue charges, my mom just waved her hand. She said Mark's dad had already offered to pay for everything to avoid more embarrassment for his family. The whole thing had been planned way deeper than I'd realized. Sarah made one more desperate attempt to save her reception by heading to the cake cutting station, but the Egyptian dessert table had been set up right next to it on purpose. The 5 tables of baklava, basbousa, and kenefe made her 3-tier beige cake look sad and forgotten. I'm so curious about how Yasmin stayed so calm when she heard those awful words. The way she immediately called her mom makes me wonder if they've dealt with this kind of thing before. Someone had stuck a tiny Egyptian flag on the top tier, next to the bride and groom figures. Mark pulled me aside near the bar, his face red from either embarrassment or the whiskey in his hand. He asked if I knew about Yasmin's plan the whole time, and when I nodded, he just said he would have done the same thing. His family was starting to figure out exactly who they just welcomed into their lives. The henna station suddenly appeared from behind the coat check, where it had been hidden. Mark's mom was actually first in line and seemed genuinely excited about getting her hands decorated. Other guests started lining up behind her while Sarah watched from the edge of the dance floor. The difference between her plain beige dress and everyone's decorated hands was impossible to miss. Sarah tried to get her bridesmaids to back her up, but they were done with her after months of mistreatment. 2 of them were already getting henna done, and another was learning dance steps from Yasmin's cousins. Her perfect aesthetic army had completely abandoned her. The photographer walked up to Sarah with his camera and asked for some shots with the cultural fusion theme. When she refused and turned away, he just shrugged. "I have plenty of material without you. This is portfolio gold," he said, before heading back to photograph the circle of women doing Zagharit. The music suddenly cut out, and Yasmin's dad was already at the microphone, his accent so thick you could spread it on bread. He started thanking the beautiful bride for welcoming their family and their traditions to this special day. The whole crowd started clapping while Sarah just stood there, frozen like someone had unplugged her. She couldn't say a word without making herself look even worse than she already did. My mom was already moving through the crowd, gathering all the Egyptian guests and Mark's family for a group photo, right where Sarah had planned her perfect beige photo wall to go. The venue coordinator herself grabbed the camera and started snapping away, making it all official documentation Sarah couldn't argue with. Later, Jake and the other groomsmen were in the middle of the dance floor, trying to learn dap. Their legs kicked all wrong, but the Egyptian uncles were cheering them on anyway, teaching them the steps and laughing at their attempts. Sarah watched her carefully picked wedding party basically join the other team, embracing everything she'd tried so hard to keep out. The DJ grabbed the mic and announced they were about to do a special Egyptian wedding tradition. I could see Sarah waving her arms, trying to stop him, but he just kept going. The lights dimmed and someone started handing out candles to everyone. A traditional blessing started playing while everyone held their candles up high. Even Mark grabbed a candle and joined in, leaving Sarah standing there all alone, refusing to participate. About 20 minutes later, I headed to the bathroom and Sarah followed me into the hallway, her mascara running down her face in black streaks. "Fix this right now," she said, grabbing my arm. I pulled away and told her she did this to herself when she called my girlfriend's family terrorists. Her hand came up fast and she slapped me hard across the face, the sound echoing down the hallway. One of Yasmin's cousins saw the whole thing from the doorway and immediately ran back to the reception. Word spread through the Egyptian network faster than wildfire, and within maybe 2 minutes, Yasmin's mom was right in Sarah's face. She wasn't yelling or anything, just speaking in this low, dangerous voice about respect and what happens when you disrespect someone's family. More relatives started gathering behind her, not threatening, but definitely present. Sarah backed up against the wall, looking terrified. Mark had to literally push through the crowd to pull his bride out of there before things got worse. The cake cutting turned into a complete disaster when Sarah refused to participate if those people were watching. Mark ended up cutting the cake by himself while his mother held the plate, and the photographer got every single shot of Sarah's absence from her own cake cutting. The Egyptian guests all clapped politely for Mark's solo effort, making Sarah look even worse. Barbara and her book club friends had formed this protective circle around Yasmin's elderly relatives, making sure they all had seats, drinks, and anything else they needed. They treated it like their own personal mission to take care of these guests, and Sarah couldn't say anything about Connecticut society ladies just being helpful. The whole social order had completely flipped on her. Sarah tried to give her prepared speech, but every time she started talking, the microphone would mysteriously stop working. The DJ kept saying it was technical difficulties, but I saw him hitting the mute button every single time she tried to speak. After the 4th attempt, she just gave up, her big moment completely stolen from her. The venue coordinator came back with a tablet showing updated charges, including potential damages and breach of contract fees if Sarah kept disrupting the event. She reminded Sarah that the deposit was in both names, and Mark had already approved all the additional expenses for the Egyptian catering and entertainment. Sarah was trapped financially, too. She couldn't even threaten to cancel anything without losing thousands of dollars. That's when the music changed and Yasmin's aunt started clapping to get everyone's attention. She pulled out a long white sash covered in safety pins and walked straight up to Mark. The Egyptian aunties surrounded him, laughing and pinning money to the sash while he stood there, confused but going along with it. $20 bills, $50s, even $1. Hundreds got pinned all over him as more relatives joined in. Sarah stood frozen by the head table, watching her new husband get covered in cash that was supposed to be for both of them. The money kept coming. Relatives I'd never seen before, walking up with bills in their hands. Mark was laughing now, turning in circles to give everyone access to pin more money. My mom walked over to Sarah with her phone out, making sure Sarah could see she was recording everything. She kept the camera rolling as Sarah's face went from shock to rage to something that looked like fear. Mom made sure to get a clear shot of Sarah's expression before moving the phone to capture Mark dancing with the Egyptian women. The venue door opened, and the Palestinian manager walked in wearing a sharp suit. He went straight to Yasmin's parents, greeting them warmly in Arabic and shaking hands with everyone in their group. Then he turned toward the room and announced how wonderful it was to see such beautiful cultural celebrations at their venue. Sarah's hands were shaking as she pulled out her phone and started dialing frantically. I could hear her leaving a voicemail for her maid of honor who'd left an hour ago. She tried calling again, and this time someone picked up. Even from across the room, we could all hear the response through the phone, telling Sarah she'd made her bed with her racist comments. The line went dead, and Sarah stood there holding her phone like she couldn't believe what just happened. That's when Mark's dad walked through the main entrance, pulling his suitcase behind him. His wife rushed over and started talking fast, pointing at Sarah and then at Yasmin's family. He didn't even drop his bag before walking straight to Yasmin's parents and apologizing for his daughter-in-law's behavior. Sarah watched her father-in-law bow slightly to them while her mother-in-law nodded along with everything he said. The band that was supposed to play had already been replaced by a group of young guys carrying instruments. Yasmin's cousin and his friends set up their equipment and started playing music that was 10 times better than what Sarah had hired. Everyone could tell the difference. Guests were actually getting up to dance instead of just sitting at their tables. I walked past 2 women from Sarah's office near the bar and heard them talking about whether this counted as a hostile work environment issue. One of them was already typing an email on her phone, while the other kept shaking her head about similar comments Sarah had made at work. Their boss was apparently copied on the email already. That's when Yasmin finally walked up to Sarah in front of everyone. She didn't yell or make a scene, just started listing dates and times in a clear voice. The comment about terrorists at the engagement party, the jokes about bombs at Thanksgiving. Every single time Sarah had mocked her accent or her family's food. Other guests started nodding, remembering these moments, some pulling out their phones to record what was happening. Sarah couldn't deny any of it because half the room had witnessed at least one incident. The favor table had been completely transformed while nobody was watching. The beige candles Sarah picked were pushed to the back, and blue glass evil eye pendants covered the front of the table. Guests were grabbing the pendants and leaving the candles behind, some taking multiple pendants for friends who couldn't make it. The pile of candles grew while the pendants disappeared fast. Mark tried one more time to save something from his wedding by asking the DJ to play their first dance song. He held out his hand to Sarah, but she crossed her arms and shook her head, pointing at all the Egyptian guests. Mark looked at her for a long moment, then stepped onto the dance floor alone. His mother started filming as he swayed by himself to their song, the saddest wedding video anyone had ever seen. Other couples joined him on the floor, dancing around him while he moved alone in the center. Sarah stood at the edge, watching her husband dance their first dance without her. The security guard Jake had paid off earlier walked over to Sarah. She grabbed his arm, pointing at all the Egyptian guests and demanding he remove them immediately. Something felt off about how smoothly this whole revenge plan was working out. Mark's dad just happened to arrive at the perfect moment to apologize. The DJ kept having technical difficulties exactly when Sarah tried to speak. He shook his head and explained that everyone had venue approval, and some even had room keys from the hotel. So, without actual cause for removal, his hands were tied. Sarah's face went red as she screamed that crashing her wedding was cause enough, but he just shrugged and said the manager had personally approved their attendance. She stormed away from him and found the event coordinator making frantic hand signals for the vendors to start packing up the decorations and food stations. The coordinator smiled and informed her that Mark's family had paid everyone overtime to stay until midnight, and breaking down early would violate their contract terms. Sarah's hands were shaking as she realized she'd been outplayed at every single turn. Across the room, Yasmin's teenage cousins started doing some TikTok dance to Arabic pop music, and within seconds, half the original wedding guests had joined in, phones out and recording everything. Someone created the hashtag #CultureCrashesWedding, and it was already getting shared across social media before Sarah even knew what TikTok was. Mark vanished from the dance floor, and nobody saw him for 20 minutes until he came back wearing a casual shirt from the hotel gift shop with a giant pyramid on the front. His mother had bought it for him, and he was grinning as he showed it off to the Egyptian uncles who were patting him on the back and taking photos with him. Sarah watched her husband literally choosing tacky Egyptian tourist gear over the custom tux she'd spent months selecting. She stumbled toward the guest book table, hoping to find some comfort in the wishes from her actual invited guests, but opened it to find pages filled with Arabic writing and crude drawings of pyramids and camels. Some messages were clearly jokes, but she couldn't read any of it to tell which ones, and her perfect keepsake had become a monument to her humiliation. She grabbed her clutch and headed for the parking lot, desperate to escape to her honeymoon suite. But when she got outside, she found her white BMW completely boxed in by Mercedes, Teslas, and Range Rovers. Yasmin's relatives had parked strategically around her car, and she had to go back inside and politely ask each owner to move their vehicle. Every single one took their sweet time finding their keys, checking their phones, finishing conversations, making her wait and smile through gritted teeth at people she'd called terrorists just days ago. By the time she finally got her car free, it was almost midnight, and the DJ was playing a final Arabic song that had literally everyone except her on the dance floor. Mark was in the center, being taught traditional moves by the uncles, his pyramid shirt soaked with sweat as he laughed and tried to copy their steps. The photographer was getting every shot, including one perfect image of the groom fully embracing the culture his bride had rejected so viciously. Sarah finally made it to the bridal suite alone, while Mark stayed downstairs at the reception that had become a full Egyptian party. She opened the door to find rose petals arranged in the shape of pyramids on the bed, and little Egyptian flag chocolates on the pillows, courtesy of the Palestinian hotel manager's housekeeping staff. Even her wedding night had been transformed into something she didn't recognize. She sat on the bed, still in her dress, and waited, but Mark never came up. The next morning, she woke up alone, her makeup smeared across the pillow. I found a text from Mark's mother saying he'd spent the night in his parents' room thinking about the marriage. Their honeymoon flight to Turks and Caicos was leaving in 6 hours, and his mother added that nobody knew if he was planning to go. I found Sarah sitting alone in the hotel restaurant, still wearing yesterday's makeup that had run down her cheeks in black streaks. She looked up when I sat down and immediately started demanding that I make Yasmin apologize for ruining her perfect day. Even after everything that had happened, she still didn't understand that she was the villain in this story, not the victim. I told her straight up that she owed everyone an apology, starting with Yasmin and her family, then Mark, then every single person who'd heard her racist garbage. She stared at me like I was speaking another language and said Yasmin had destroyed her wedding out of spite. I reminded her that she'd literally called my girlfriend's family terrorists and banned them from attending because of their race. Sarah's response was that she just wanted nice photos without those people making everything look cheap. That's when I realized my sister would never change or see what she'd done wrong. The next morning, Mark showed up at the honeymoon suite with his luggage. But instead of loading it, he sat Sarah down and told her they needed to postpone the trip because his family wanted to discuss what happened at the reception. Sarah's face went white as Mark explained his parents were horrified by her behavior and needed answers before they could support the marriage going forward. The marriage wasn't even 24 hours old, and Mark was already pulling back. 3 days later, my phone rang at work with Sarah sobbing that the wedding photos were completely ruined because every single shot showed the Egyptian family taking over her reception. The photographer had delivered exactly what he captured, and when she demanded he edit them out, he flat out refused, saying he documented the event as it happened. She kept screaming about how this was supposed to be her perfect day, but now she had nothing to show for it except pictures of the very people she tried to keep out. A week passed, and Mom told me Sarah was still living at the hotel because Mark needed space to think about their future. Even worse, Sarah's boss had put her on administrative leave after several co-workers came forward about racist comments she'd made in the past that they hadn't reported until now. The wedding that was supposed to launch her perfect married life had instead destroyed her reputation at work and in their social circle. Yasmin and I met Mark and his mother for dinner at a quiet Italian place, where his mom spent the whole meal apologizing for Sarah's behavior toward our family. She mentioned they were looking into annulment options if Sarah didn't agree to serious counseling, because the family couldn't accept having someone with those views as part of their lives. Mark looked exhausted as he pushed pasta around his plate and admitted the marriage might not survive what happened at the reception. Later that week, Sarah sent out a group text that read like a corporate PR statement saying she was sorry if anyone was offended by any misunderstandings at the wedding. I texted back that she needed to do way better than that fake apology. Within minutes, the thread exploded with Yasmin's relatives explaining exactly why her non-apology wasn't enough and what real accountability looked like. 2 weeks after the wedding, Sarah finally agreed to start therapy after Mark gave her an ultimatum about divorce. She'd lost most of her friend group, who were disgusted by what they learned. Her job was hanging by a thread, and her brand, new marriage, was basically over. The perfect aesthetic she'd protected so hard had cost her everything that actually mattered in life. Yasmin and I announced our engagement at a small family dinner, where Mom immediately started planning and joked about her new expertise with multicultural weddings. We made sure Sarah wasn't invited to the announcement because boundaries needed to be clear, and some bridges were meant to stay burned. A month after the wedding, Sarah and Mark were living separately while doing couples therapy twice a week. She was starting to understand that what she called aesthetic concerns were just racism dressed up in fancy words, but the damage was already done. The wedding she planned to be perfect had become the perfect lesson in what happens when you show your true colors. Thanks for sticking with me while I tried to make sense of all those twists and turns. Definitely made it way more fun having you along for the ride. If you made it to the end, drop a comment. I love reading all your comments.